Hey everybody! Today we're going to be talking with Candace Hicks about her solo show, which is behind me, called Understanding Coincidence in the Multiverse. I'm going to turn this around so that you can see all of her work. Just going to do a quick pan while I invite Candace to join. Hey everybody! I know I caught you on this very cold Austin day. Well, cold for Austin. I hope this is a nice surprise. Hey Candace,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm doing great.
Good morning. How are you? Are you staying warm?
I am. Yeah, it is really awful outside, really drizzly and cold. How's the
Yeah.
weather there in Austin?
It's similar. Icy, cold, but kind of nice to be at the gallery and surrounded by your work, and nobody else is really around today. So hopefully for everybody watching, it's a nice like break from their attempts at working from home.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of been several days of this, so I'm ready for it to not be so awful.
Well, warm weather in Austin or in Texas is around the corner.
Yes, it's always right around the corner. Yeah, if you don't like the weather in Texas, you just wait 5 minutes.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
turns. I like your background.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like it's always appropriate since my work is so related to literature. I definitely like to be surrounded by books.
Yeah. Let's talk about this solo show that you've got up in our gallery right now. This is,
Yeah, I'm delighted to. Yeah, so this is Understanding Coincidence in the Multiverse, which the title comes from one of the subtitles of the books, or the subtitle of both books actually, String Theory, Understanding Coincidence in the Multiverse. I feel like that word multiverse, I've seen it increase in usage over the last decade. It feels like um, people it's entered into kind of the zeitgeist, and even if we don't quite understand the physics of how that's possible, we all sort of intuitively feel like we live in a multiverse. So this idea of coincidence has been important to me for a long time, and has been something that's been a part of my work for a long time. And coincidence to me is sort of this way that we tell ourselves stories. um, Novelists know this because they're always writing about an unlikely event happening, a chance encounter, or something where it seems almost like the odds are stacked against it. But the thing is, if novelists didn't write about unlikely events, we wouldn't really believe in their verisimilitude, right? We wouldn't accept it as uh, reality, and yet we fully expect the unlikely thing to happen, like that we're going to run into the person that we were just thinking about, and that will be this life changing event. Um, so I don't know. I feel like coincidence is something that it's really multifaceted, and I enjoy when there's a show like this that comes together, hearing other people's coincidence and the role that it plays in their lives too.
it's been fun for me to hear it too. And we've already got a great question, which I feel like we've got to address because it's a little unbelievable. Can you describe what this medium is on all this work?
Describe the medium.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I almost all of this work is embroidery, which this is the first time that I've done a whole show of embroidered work. But yeah, so I'm stitching the linear patterns and the text into canvas, raw canvas, with embroidery floss, and I enjoyed that because, well, I started out doing that because it was a pun. I was working on a series of books for a long time called Common Threads. And I say that in the past tense, but I still am. I'm working on volume 144 right now. So I've been doing that for a long time, and I'll probably continue to do it. And when I say a long time, I think I started the series 18 years ago. Common Threads also about coincidence, and particularly literary coincidence. And so I I thought of that idea of common threads, and that I could stitch these, um, and you know, there's something about integrating the mark that is possible with textile, and so I always really liked that. I also like the tactile feeling of it, particularly with the books, and the fact that visitors or readers can page the books themselves. They can pick up that sense of the tactile as well. Oh, I see that you're going over to the
Yep,
book too.
there's the
Yeah,
book.
so I really like that people get the chance to touch them. We don't have that experience with a lot of visual artwork. The idea that you can interact with it and have a reading experience, it is sort of haptic, or has a kind of a textural sensory experience too. Um, and I think that I sort of discounted that or wasn't aware of it for a while. But even before I was making embroidered books, I was making books as artworks. And I've always loved that sense that when you make a book, it's unlike a painting or a sculpture, in the sense that the artist makes it with their hands, and then they pass it to another person to view it or to read it. And so there's really this like one-to-one communication that happens with a book. You don't necessarily experience it collectively the way that you do with public sculpture or with paintings. There's a kind of intimacy to books that I really enjoy, and I think the tactile quality, it enhances that.
You know, I see people interact with artwork all the time in the gallery, and one of the things that I like about your work so much is what you're talking about. When people actually take the time to read your work, it almost turns into an inside joke between, you know, me and them. This idea of intimacy, because so many people visit art galleries quickly or look at artwork quickly, and you know, we look at all sorts of things really quickly these days. So to slow down and read all the pages of this book and all of the pages of this book, I mean, it takes time. But they're filled with incredible ideas and observations, like you say about coincidence, that when people actually read them, I don't know, it just, I really respect it. I know that's the reason why you make the work, and there is this nice little intimate relationship that's formed with you, with me, with the work, with that person when people read it.
Yeah, I often think of books as being a temporal media, in the way that a film is, for example. You're asking the viewer or the reader for a larger commitment of their time. I think that they also work on a visual level, in the sense that I never feel bad if someone doesn't take the time to read the whole thing. I think that they can also sort of dip in and out of them,
Right.
because it is a little bit stream of consciousness in the way that they're composed. So I don't feel like anyone is really missing the experience if they don't read the whole thing cover to cover in the way that I've presented it. I like the way that you have the one book hanging in the gallery, because it does sort of allow for that exploration, that can be less linear and more experiential, kind of walking through it throughout the pages.
Yeah. Somebody named Cloud Shaped asked a question too. Is each work meant to be enjoyed individually, or are they all part of one big multiverse? And I think every page can be enjoyed individually, like you just said. Um, but what do you think about that question?
Well, so part of it is for selfish reasons, in terms of the way that I prefer to work. I really like allowing a project or something that I set up for myself, so that I can work in series, or I guess in some ways execute a work without having to go back to the drawing board of ideas every day. So I often find myself working serially. The other series in the show, the Notes for String Theory, of course, is in many, many panels, some of which you did you don't have them hanging necessarily because I sent so many to you.
There's so many.
But I like the idea of an idea that you can explore through many different iterations, and in a way it's sort of generative. The two books that you have in the show are the third and fourth iteration of the concept of string theory for me. And so even with books, I often find myself making multiple book works about a similar idea. Part of that is that I don't have that many ideas. I'm sort of a fixated person. And so I really like the idea of like exploring something in depth and breadth. But part of that too is that it gives me a strategy in the studio for making where I've sort of set myself up to make the work not in an automated way, but like I don't feel at loose ends about what to do next. I've made a big project for myself.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I mean, artists need the sort of option to be able to just execute sometimes and to just keep working. But I think you saw yourself a little short because all of these books are filled with your own writing, correct? And
Yes.
your own reading, your own observations about what you're reading. What is that process like?
Well, so obviously some in some places I'm quoting the authors of the books that I'm reading. For these particular books, I limited myself to, or tried to limit myself to, a particular genre of literature. So one of those volumes, I'm attempting to only read science fiction, for example, and I was hoping that I would find coincidences by reading only science fiction. I assumed that maybe there would be instances of time travel or certain themes that would crop up that are common to science fiction. But my goal was to ignore those sort of obvious things and look for the harder to find commonalities that each of these had. For example, another time I read only murder mystery genre, and rather than some of the things that you would think would happen over and over again in a murder mystery, I kept coming across instances of people sort of casually discovering a secret room, and in many ways it was an example of lazy writing, right? So they
Right.
Oh, we stumbled upon a secret room. Well, there's not real. In both instances, there was no explanation as to, well, what made the room secret if you could so easily find it. And then I want to hear more about a secret room. That sounds great. It prompted me to make an exhibition about that secret passage that took the double meaning of that word secret passage in terms of it being like a physical transition between two architectural spaces, but also being like a text hidden within a text. So I don't know, a lot of times these things that I come across in my reading, they really get to me and make me think about things profoundly. Even reading some of the worst writing that I've ever read, it led me to I hope make something that was better.
Yeah. Are you taking notes just constantly on like a pad of paper while you're reading? And
Well, I have my notebook. I've been
nice.
carrying one of these for my whole life, I guess. Well, unlike you, I'm not a journaler in the sense that I don't necessarily keep any kind of record of my day-to-day thoughts or observations, but I will make notes of things about what I'm reading. Usually, though, and this is true for good design as well, good visual design. I think that things become more significant through repetition, and so I definitely feel like even if I'm really interested in something, I won't make a note of it until it happens more than once. And then I really know that, the universe is telling me to pay attention to it. So having that kind of rigidity where I really need to be hit over the head with things, I find it kind of comforting, and it's not like a religion per se or some sort of superstition, but it borders on that. I like to hope that the work that I make about it is in some ways a parody of that kind of meaning making that we all do, try to make sense of what's happening in our lives. I think that doing a pseudoscientific study of coincidence is a way of kind of beating the world into making some kind of sense to us, right?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that a lot of art making is about drawing associations and trying to make sense of the world.
Yeah.
We've got another good question here by Cloud Shaped. Do you feel like art critics or literary critics are more equipped to comment on your work?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Do you feel like art critics or literary critics are more equipped to comment on your work?
Oh, I so I don't. I feel like we're sort of in a landscape where there's a dearth of criticism. You know, we're sort of in a more of an attention economy. Um, I would love to think that criticism is something that people are practicing. Um, so I'm not sure. I feel like we're kind of in the world of like likes and thumbs up and things like that. Um, but I have become more interested in writing, particularly. It occurred to me for the first time recently that there were some things that I would like to write, and that I might not make them into an object, but that the actual composition of the text was the part that was really important to me, and particularly composing fiction. So storytelling has always been really important to me, and it is occurring to me now that I think that I might not make every text that I compose.
Hmm. You're just realizing this now. Just yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
cool.
mean, there's something about um, sort of bypassing the publishing industry in a way. That was something that really got me into making artist books in the very beginning. When I was an undergrad, the tradition of artist books was something that really inspired me, because those artists were in a lot of ways, making zines or making chapbooks or printing their own work, because they were sort of disenfranchised and didn't have access to publication. So so that notion really appealed to me, the idea that you could get your work to other people in the form of a book, and in a lot of ways you could really explore an idea really deeply and yet have it housed in this very intimate box, that everyone understands how to use.
Hmm.
People everywhere know how to access a book, whereas something that's more a newer technology can be equally disenfranchising. So yeah, I think that the idea, it just seemed natural to me, that the idea that not only would I compose a text, but that I would also sort of produce it as an object. Um, yeah, but it's I think that writing has become more important to me for its own sake.
Yeah. And we've got a question. Did you start as a writer or object maker?
Um, I started as a bookmaker, so
Hmm.
and I feel a little bit embarrassed about this now, because the term artist, um, as an identity, it was something that I used to shy away from a little bit. I was very comfortable telling people that I was a book artist, but I was a lot less comfortable declaring myself to be an artist. And you know, maybe that is just sort of some ideas that I had about who artists are in society. But I enjoyed considering myself a book artist. So to that end, I was always writing and making in conjunction. Um, I studied art in school rather than studying writing. So I did choose that narrowing of a path. And now I'm comfortable calling myself an artist. I don't think I feel like it's a conflict at all. I think there's lots of different kinds of artists, and I'm not worried about what that implies to call myself that anymore.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I hear people all the time talk about how they can't call themselves an artist even though they make artwork, and I think we should all be a little bit looser with that term. There's no threshold where the day that you become an
Yes.
artist.
Yeah, I think, well, I feel at this point like I have paid my dues to art in a way, and I have a kinship with other artists. So I don't feel like an interloper in that field anymore. And so, for better or for worse, like I think it is still a sensitive ground. A lot of us, especially my students, worry about what constitutes art and who gets to do it, and a lot of these kinds of gatekeeping. To me, it's not very useful to define art by exclusion or to exclude people from being artists. It's way better if we recognize it as a fundamentally human activity.
I totally agree. Um, Also, so with your panels here, I just wanted to ask, um, how would you say, where do you think the connection is between the panel work, the books, and how do they both sort of tie into the main concept of this show, which is the multiverse and understanding coincidence in the multiverse?
Well, so with the panels, they're some of the only work that I've made that is not text based. So for me, it is kind of exploring new territory, and with a lot of them, I am kind of coming back to this idea of string theory in the sense that it is an attempt by science to understand the way that the universe works. And a lot of the designs that I've produced, in many ways, they warp or they bend space. So you will see what would normally be presented as a flat page. It might be twisted spatially or made into a vortex or some other kind of geometry. This bending of space-time is, sort of a concept that physics introduced into our imagination, and I like thinking of the ways that visually I can talk about something that mathematically I could not describe. So
Hmm.
um, I think that they relate to the book work in the sense that I have taken that form of the classic notebook in many different iterations. The Common Threads series of books that I make are facsimiles of composition notebooks. So I've been stitching notebook paper in order to compose my texts on them for a long time. These have to work without words, and so I feel like they still communicate an idea, but it's more visual as opposed to the literal and literary communication with text.
It's so exciting to me to see an artist work within stipulations, limitations, and just like, you know, work that, as much as you have. Getting this much variation out of the simple idea of a notebook page is it's really exciting. It's inspiring, and I don't know. It's just very impressive, and to be able to dig through your work and see something like this, and to think about the fact that if I was to just come across this one piece, wasn't familiar with your work, I might not associate that with a notebook page until, you start to see these, I don't want to say simpler compositions because that's not fair, but more representative of the sort of origin of the work. It's really exciting work. So Candace, is there anything else about this exhibition that you'd like to mention before we say goodbye?
Well, let me see. I'm really excited for people to see the way that you have it installed within the space. That was lovely that was sort of a surprise for me too, to see the way that it would come together, where you have the book that you can walk through it and explore it, and it has a sort of physical sense of being immersed in it. And so kind of having the different ways of looking at things. I'm glad too that you have some of the small books, the Common Threads books that I mentioned, and that's a much more intimate experience of reading. So I'm looking forward to, and I invite feedback if others have questions, or I hope people will feel free to contact me. And I definitely see the occasion of having an exhibition as an invitation for conversation. I look forward to talking to people about this, and always like to hear the coincidences that people experience in their lives, and especially if they're open to me stealing some of those for my own purposes. So I promise to get permission before I do anything like that. But yeah.
Nice. Well, for all you who are watching, thank you for following along. This exhibition is on view in Austin until February 25th. So if you happen to live in the area, or, Houston, Dallas, please come down to Austin. Please come over to Austin. It's a show that is very difficult to capture online. There's so much content here that, you can't read quickly enough. And, I really hope you can make it out. Candace, thank you for your time today. And thank you for,
Kevin. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you for talking about your work. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.